Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Representatives Boyd, Campbell, Grills, Halford, Isling, Marsh, McKenzie, Potts, Powers, Russell, Thompson, Todd, Towns, Weaver, Whitson, Vice Chairman Hall.
Here.
Chairman Howell.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any personal orders from committee members? Seeing none, members, we do have a short calendar, and we're going to try to move these bills along as rapidly as possible. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask the sponsors. But at the end of the calendar, the Department of Transportation and Commissioner Bright they are here, in fact, to give us an update on several items that will be of interest to this committee. So without objection, we'll take up item number 1. Chairman Halsey, House Bill 165. Chairman Halsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion and a second.
And thank you, committee. This has an amendment that I think is traveling up from the subcommittee.
What is your amendment number, sir?
001690.
That's what I have. Do I have a motion second have a motion and a second on the amendment? Could you explain the amendment, please?
Yes, when we passed this last year, we passed this very same bill last year, and there was some confusion in the wording. When they came out with the bill this time, they put BT, Bravo Tango, to be the first 2 letters and then 5 numbers. Then they discovered that there is already a BT tag. So they had to change it and make it B Bravo Delta, BD. And that's what the amendment does.
Okay, with that explanation, we're voting on the amendment. All in favor of adding amendment to the bill, say aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The amendment is on the bill. Please explain your bill, sir.
Last year, when we passed this, the wording was a little confusing in the bill, and it caused clerks a lot of problems. They thought only the manufacturer could get the tag, not the people who actually deliver the boats. So they went back and reworded it to show that these folks can purchase this tag as well, and that's all it is.
Okay. Question has been called on the bill. Without objection, we will vote on House Bill 107. All in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Your bill passes and goes to Finance Committee, sir.
Chairman of committee.
Thank you very much. Committee, we are now on item number 2 on your calendar, House Bill 64. Chairman Lafferty, you are recognized, sir. We have a motion and a second on the bill. Please explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I believe everybody's heard this once before, but basically what we're doing here, we're streamlining, which is always a good thing in government. Currently, automobile clubs or associations have to file for a new certificate of authority every year. This bill allows the automobile clubs and the associations to apply for the renewal rather than a new certificate, which translates into just updating whatever information is needed. With that, if there's any questions.
Any questions from members for the sponsor? Question has been called on the bill. All in favor of sending House Bill 64 to Calendar and Rules, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Your bill goes to Calendar and Rules.
Thank you, Chairman.
sir.
Thank you, committee.
Item number 3 on your calendar, House Bill 40, Representative Ogles. I don't see Representative Ogles. Is Representative Ogles in the building? If not, we will roll Representative Ogles' bill 4 spaces. Oh, he just came in. Your timing is excellent, sir. I just called your name. We have a motion and a second on House Bill 40. Representative Ogles, please explain your bill to us.
Thank you, Chairman, members of committee. This bill creates the 2021 Precious Cargo Act. And what this bill does is it allows people, when they register for their vehicle registration system, if they have a special need which hampers their ability to communicate with law enforcement, they can register their car in the state database. So if a member of law enforcement pulls them over on the screen of their patrol car, it'll register that they have a special need which may hamper their communication ability. We also amended it in subcommittee to say if you have a physical condition that would hamper the speed at which you exit a vehicle, that also would be noted. This simply gives a tool for citizens to communicate some special needs with law enforcement help on some situations, maybe late at night, or that may put them in a position to have a stop that doesn't go as planned.
Representative Vogels, I notice you do have an amendment that we need to put on this bill in the full.
Yes, Chairman.
What is that? What is that amendment number?
003770 is what I
Okay.
have.
I believe you explained the amendment in your comments there. So we're voting on adding the amendment to House Bill 40. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The amendment is on the bill. Any further comments from the sponsor? Any questions from the committee? Question has been called. All in favor of House Bill 40, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Your bill goes to calendar and rules, sir.
Thank you, Chairman and members of
Thank
committee.
you. Item number 4, House Bill 101 by Chairman Jernigan. It's my understanding that Chairman Jernigan is chairing a subcommittee and cannot be here at this moment. So Chairman Whitson is signed on to that bill. So I'm going to let Chairman Whitson run the bill. Chairman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is House Bill 101 to classify wheelchairs as not being a moving vehicle.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Any questions for the sponsor? Hearing none, we're voting on House Bill 101. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The bill goes to calendar and rules. On the calendar, number 5, House Bill 92 by Speaker Marsh.
Thank you, Mr.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
I'll
Chairman.
get it right one of these days.
This bill is an administration bill brought by TDOT.
We have a question on the bill. Any objection? Did I hear question or motion? Motion, okay. I thought you said question on the bill. We have a motion and a second. I'm sorry. Representative Marsh, continue.
Okay. This is an administration bill brought by TDOT concerning utility projects across the state. Presently, Tennessee law requires TDOT to notify utilities by certified mail before starting a project so utilities can provide where their facilities are located within the project limits. This bill would allow TDOT to send the notices by email rather than certified mail. Email will speed up the process and reduce postage costs. Bill would save TDOT over $60,000 a year in reduced postage costs. This bill has also been requested by the utilities who prefer to get email rather than a certified mail. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Good bill. Any questions for the sponsor? We have a question on the bill. Without objection, we're voting on House Bill 92. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The bill goes to Finance Committee. And we're now on number 6, House Bill 88. Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
If I may, thank you, Chairman. If I may I remain here rather than the podium?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. House Bill 88, members, bottom line revises the stipulations. Private entities must comply to conduct driver education courses and community ed courses. Now, a brief summary of this. The bill removes outdated code requirements within the Department of Safety's driver safety and child safety courses. Currently, our code requires that both courses meet all of the requirements of probation supervisors within the Commerce and Insurance Code section. The courses used for driver safety and child restraint safety do not need to meet the 40-plus requirements that's laid down right now. These courses are meant for people who receive traffic citations, and the department has pulled the most relevant requirements from the current code that should be required for these businesses that offer driver safety and child safety courses. Mr. Chairman, with that, I will entertain any questions. However, I think your office did receive a request that just in case something that comes up that Kiesling can't answer, we do have representation out in the audience from
Okay.
the department,
Okay.
just in case. But with that, again, Chairman, I will entertain any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Chairman. I do have a motion and second on the bill. Any questions for the sponsor? Any objection to voting on House Bill 88? Hearing none, we're voting on House Bill 88. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The bill goes to calendar and rules, Chairman. Number 7 on your calendar, House Bill 87 by Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative Russell,
Chairman.
you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it all right?
I have a
to
motion and a
present
second.
it- Is it okay to present it here or would you like
Yes,
to podium?
fine, that's fine.
Chairman, committee members, this bill revises various provisions regarding the material used to issue driver's license and identification credentials. The Department of Safety is currently limited to only being able to produce laminated color photo licenses. Due to constantly changing technology, the department would like the ability to use color, black and white, laminated, polycarbonate, or other types of materials or graphics to issue driver's license or other credentials. And I believe somebody's here from the department to testify if we have any questions.
Okay, I have a motion second on the bill. Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we're voting on House Bill 87. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The bill goes to calendar and rules.
Thank you.
Number 8 on your calendar, also Representative Russell, you're recognized. House Bill 175. Have a motion and second?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. House Bill 175 just clarifies the mounting or placement of a trailer hitch ball in front of a registration plate will not be considered when making the determination whether the registration plate is clearly visible. Just says your trailer hitch ball can't be a reason to stop a driver.
Okay, I have a motion and second on the bill. Any questions for the sponsor? Question has been called on the bill. All in favor of voting on 175, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The bill goes to calendar and rules. Item number 9, House Bill 234, also Representative Russell. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second.
House Bill 234 is just a cleanup in the language because it was confusing. It clarifies that the existing requirement for drivers of motorcycles to wear a helmet applies to drivers of autocycles that are not fully enclosed. What happened was people were getting tickets because they couldn't understand the law, so it just makes it easier to read and understand. Does not change one thing about it other than those two things.
All right, any questions for the sponsor? Question has been called. All in favor of House Bill 234 say aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The bill goes to calendar and rules. We're down to the last item on the calendar. I will now hand the gavel to Vice Chairman Hall.
Chairman Howell, you're now recognized. Is there a second? Properly motioned and second. Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you. This is an administration bill, and it does 4 things. A very simple bill. Changes 2 statutory weight classes for purposes of determining the tax that is due at the time of registration and renewal. It allows the department to issue renewal decals instead of having to buy a complete new big license plates every year. It updates the statute to reflect that county clerks issue off-highway temporary permits, which is what they're currently doing. And it updates a Department of Revenue job title from Taxpayer and Vehicle Services Director to Vehicle Services Director. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions regarding House Bill 86? Question on the bill? We'll now be voting on House Bill 86. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Though opposed, the House moves on to calendar and rules. That moves on to finance. I'll now
Thank you, Chairman Hall. Members, that is the end of our calendar, and we are pleased to have some very special guests with us today. It's always good to have Commissioner Bright in committee, and we had scheduled a presentation and an update on the Improve Act, which I know the Improve Act impacts every one of our counties and every one of our districts. And so we had him on the calendar, and then something happened. We had an ice and snowstorm. And so we have rescheduled, and always good to have Commissioner Bright and some of his staff here. Commissioner Bright, good to have you, and I'll just let you introduce the folks who are with you.
Thank you, Chairman Howell. I would like to do our own roll call. So you've got some familiar faces up here, and you've got some unfamiliar faces. Obviously, to my right, Mr. Paul Deggs, our Chief Engineer, which you know very well. To my left is Joe Galbato, Chief Financial Officer. On the other side of him is Jay Norris. He heads up our Department of Safety, and I wanted him to speak to you a little bit about some work zone safety that we got going on. Back behind Jay is Preston Elliott. He is a new face to you. He's Deputy Commissioner and oversees long-range planning and our environmental division. And then to his right is Michelle Frazier, and she's our Director of Aeronautics. So we're going to talk a little bit about aeronautics since there's some money in the budget this year for aeronautics. So before I turn it over to Joe to talk about the budget and an overview, and Paul's going to talk about that also, along with the other people I just introduced, you mentioned the snow and ice. So I continue to be very in awe of what TDOT does, or amazed or whatever, or humbled at what all our people do. So as you mentioned, snow and ice. So I had the opportunity to watch those folks working around the clock, guys and girls, and we probably had close to 1,000 people. So at one point I looked on the map, and we had snow from Memphis all the way over to Knoxville. So it was probably one of the largest snow events we've ever had as far as snow and ice and pushing it off the road and treating it and all the stuff we do. And those guys were working 16-hour days, 8 hours off. They were sleeping in the garages in the regions and the districts. There was folks in the garages cooking food. All the mechanics were on staff. They were making sure the blades on the snow plows were tuned up, the trucks were running. So for me to see all that going on, it was humbling. And I want to thank y'all for the support that y'all give us at TDOT to do what we do and enable these people to do what they do for the state of Tennessee. So I appreciate that continued support. And as you can tell, I'm pretty darn proud, and hopefully you're proud as far as your involvement in what you do.
Commissioner, if I may just briefly interrupt, let me say how proud I was as chairman of this committee. I got emails from all across the state of Tennessee, people expressing their gratitude for the job that TDOT was doing on our highways. And that speaks volumes for you and your staff. And I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Chairman, likewise, down on the western end, we did too. So Commissioner, how about a two-hand clapper, guys?
Thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
Very good. All right. We're going to let the commissioner continue with the presentation, and we'll save any future questions for the end.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to roll it over to Mr. Joe Galbato, CFO.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. Joe Galbato, Deputy Commissioner and Chief Financial Officer. So we got a lot to cover. We actually covered this with Senate Transportation this morning. Thought it was only fair for you to see the exact same presentation. So if we go to the first slide is a high-level analysis of our budget variances on the revenue side. Between fiscal 21 and fiscal 22, federal will be down about 6 million. The state will be up about 114 million, and local revenue will be about the same. The next 3 slides, I'll talk about the variances very quickly. So on the federal side, pretty simple to understand. There was spillover of about $6 million from the CARES Act on federal transit from fiscal 20 to 21. There's no such spillover between 21 and 22. The digest here. So the state user fees, you can see, will be down year over year, about $23 million. When the funding board, and they put our projections together for us, when they put the projections together in fiscal 21, we felt that they were a little bit aggressive. 22 look much more reasonable, with the possible exception of gasoline. And again, I'll cover it in 2 slides. The next 3 bullet points discuss the one-time general fund infusions that the governor has proposed. $85 million for our rail program. And then on the local revenue slide, as I've said before, there's really not a big change in the local revenue. Our program operations folks look at all of the different projects and determine what the federal match will be. All right, so here's the money slide. A lot of information here, but I can make it very simple for everybody. I'll talk about the columns first and then the rows next. The first column is fiscal 19. The reason I wanted that here was because that is the last year of no COVID impact. In fiscal 20, we had 2 months of COVID impact in May and June. And then, of course, the budgets for 21 and 22. So let me take you through the intricacies of the line items. So on gasoline, as you can see, We were allotted 509 million in 2019. That dropped in 2020 to 505. The reason that dropped was totally because of COVID. And if you, as you remember, the FAST Act, the Improve Act on the state side phased in gas, diesel, propane, and natural gas fees 18. So then you can see growing to 534 the next year, why we thought it was just a bit aggressive. Now, in fiscal 22, the funding board has lowered it down to 514, which is good. The problem we see right now is, as I look at collections as of today, we're trending toward 470 to 480. So that number looks a bit aggressive. On the diesel side, the good news is on the trucking industry, diesel was really not impacted a whole lot by COVID. So the 186 million you see growing to 210, that was because of the final 3-cent increase on the diesel tax. So it took us to 210. The 217 that is in 2021 is tracking right toward what we see today. So the funding board keeping that same 217 as a budget is a bit conservative, but that's good because, as I said, if I've got downside possibility on gas, I've got upside on diesel. Special petroleum, that's our 1.4 cent tax, the 1 cent on petroleum and volatile fuels, and another 4/10 for the environmental assurance fee for underground storage tank regulation. Always hangs in the mid-30s. Vehicle registration was also impacted by COVID. You can see we collected 286 in fiscal 19. It dropped to 278. Not because cars and trucks were fewer in Tennessee, but because there was a spillover of some of those registration fees into fiscal 21. So the 293 in fiscal 21, we are trending toward that number, but again, for fiscal 21 fees and some spillover from 20. So that makes our 22 number pretty good. Beer and bottle tax is always somewhere between 6 and 7 million, so that's not changing. And then as you all can see, as a sore thumb on the Transportation Equity Fund, the big blip in 2020. That 65 million is composed of a 39 million back payment. Without that 65, without the back payment, which was 39 million, 65 becomes 26 million, 24 on air, 2 on rail. So our next slide, we like to bring this up to you every year. We're very proud. We're pretty well managed financially at TDOT. We are one of the few DOTs that spend 2% or less on administration, and the vast majority of our funds go back to the citizens in the form of construction, maintenance, and grants. This past year, 88% was our 5-year long-term funding bill. It expired September of 2020. We did not get a long-term bill, but we did get a 1-year extension, and I'll discuss that in a moment. I want to impress upon everybody that states need long-term funding for our viability as far as the continuity and project planning. But what I will tell you as your CFO, that it's just as important, if not more important, to have stable and reliable funding. So today, no surprise to people, Washington gives out more than it gets in. So it actually required a $14 billion infusion from the general fund to keep the Highway Trust Fund in Washington solvent. So under any definition, stable and reliable funding would not mean one-time arbitrary infusions, but be 1 or 2. So we have all of our apportionment, all of our obligational limitations, so we are good to go, and there'll be nothing delayed in 2021. That last note, the AASHTO states, all the states in AASHTO are pushing for a long-term bill, but I'll caution you, a 5-year bill at current funding is a problem. And then lastly, we thank you, previous legislators, previous governors, and certainly Governor Lee, for keeping us debt-free. So it's much easier as a CFO to manage our finances when I don't have to take CARES Act. So as you know, we are funded federally by Federal Highway, Federal Way, but we did get it for transit and aviation. So I want to cover that quickly. The majority of that went to our major transit agencies in Memphis, Knoxville, Nashville, and Chattanooga. But 95 million did go to small urban and rural transit agencies across the state. So the intent of this was to keep these transit agencies running. Obviously, fare box revenues will be down during COVID, as they still are, and other revenues are down. So this is meant to plug the hole in the boat there. So they used it for operating expenses, salaries, et cetera. The next slide is basically the same for FAA. 125 million came to the state. Most of that went to our big air carrier airports, but 4.5 million went to our general aviation for the same purposes as transit, to keep everything running. But they had one extra good thing that allowed them to make the federal match with this money as well. All right, before I get to the slide, I want to make a couple comments that we did not put in this presentation. We complied at TDOT with the legislative directive back in May and June of cutting heads. We cut 20 heads out of our staff, of our complement, because of that. We also 3 heads previous to that for the same legislative intent. But I want to impart on you also, you're constantly giving different headcount to different state agencies for the shared service initiative. So we've given 6 heads to the Department of Human Resources for transactional personnel. We gave 16 to the STS for workstation consolidation, IT people, and we gave 25 heads to the Department of Finance and Administration for the centralized accounting initiative. So we're constantly looking at trimming. Lastly, we're very proud of what we've done as far as COVID, and that'd be a nice segue to this slide. As you noticed, everyone, during COVID, our regional and district people, everybody went to work just as normal. Our maintenance, construction, help truck, all those folks worked just as normal, but they had safety protocols in place. So instead of having 3, 4, and 5 people in a vehicle, we had 1, maybe 2. We had new cleaning supplies, new PPE, so we did things as safe as we possibly could. And I do want to brag, they are in my bureau, but I do want to brag on information technology. Our IT folks, long before COVID was even thought of, made sure that everybody at TDOT at headquarters across the street at the Polk building had either a tablet, a laptop, had connectivity. So when the directive came from the commissioner and the governor for us to go home, we really didn't miss a beat. And so I want to just thank them for that. Many other state DOTs, not only do they not have connectivity, they were just trying to find a way to get computers to their people. So lastly, before I pass this over to Commissioner and Paul, on the backstop funding. So as I said, the federal highway got no CARES Act money, but they did get backstop funding. Let's be very clear. So backstop funding is not stimulus. Stimulus is to start new things and to invigorate everything. The backstop funding is the same intent as to keep us running. So as I mentioned before, our user fees have been down. In fiscal 20, they were down by $33 million. Our projections right now for fiscal 21 is that they'll be down somewhere around 75 to 100 million. We expect COVID impacts to continue into 22, which means cumulatively we will be down somewhere between 180 and 220 million dollars. So this money basically allows us to cuts that we were going to have to make, whether it was to projects or to maintenance activities, we won't have to really make those. So with that, like I said, 209 million to Tennessee. The normal allocation to the big MPOs, we're sitting at 187. And so I thought I'd pass it back to Commissioner and Paul for how we're going to divide that up.
Sure. Again, Paul Deggs, Chief Engineer. So when, our budget.
Deputy Commissioner, could I interrupt just a second?
Sure.
While we're on the budget aspect of it, I think a couple of members have
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Hello, Joe. Thanks for being here. I have a question, just real quick, because I was writing down these numbers and I couldn't write them down fast enough.
Okay.
Is this going to be available to us on a hard copy?
Yeah, we can make it available. We've given the.
Please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten into the digital, but I do have my iPad here. I'm doing my best. But I had a question. Did you say the numbers were what did you say was going to be our deficit in terms of money?
So
we're going to be down.
Right.
We would be
for
down.
fiscal, you're actually down $33 million in gas, diesel, vehicle registration. That number in fiscal 21, we're projecting to be anywhere between 75 and 100. It's trending towards 75. Now, the good news I'll bring up, when this first hit, we actually thought it could be upwards of 200 million. You remember COVID, when it hit, everything went darn near in half. So we thought we could have really big problems. So it's 75 to 100 million this year, and we think it'll be 75 to 100 million next year. So when you add, again, you'll be 180 million to 220 million as a range that we think we could be down. This backstop funding will fill that void.
And excuse me.
You're recognized.
And you said something about some projects would they be on hold? Would they be, I know you're not going to get rid of the 9. How many projects are left on that Improve Act right now?
Well, Paul will cover that in a second. We
okay.
originally started with 962, but
Right.
because we've subdivided, it's over 1,000 now.
Okay. Well, I'll just get my info from Mr. Daggs then, but
Okay.
thank you for that.
Okay,
Thank you,
you're welcome.
Chairman.
You're welcome. And I might, Sam just pointed out to me that information that you're seeking is on his laptop or iPad. So it's in the package if you want to look online. It's on the dashboard. It's on the dashboard. Thank you. I'm sorry for the interruption. Paul,
Sure.
you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it is, the discussion that was just had talked about the shortage in our program. So before they call it the CRISA funding, the COVID relief funding that the feds passed, that was passed on like December 27th. But earlier in the fiscal year, we had to make decisions. As Joe mentioned, we anticipated cuts as much as $250 million in the current fiscal year. And so we started looking and we had to make some cuts. And so, for instance, in our maintenance program, we took a mowing cycle out. So we looked at a lot of different places to make cuts, and we cut several things in our maintenance budget. We have a Improve Act Transit Capital Grants program, and then we have projects. And so the bulk of the cuts that we anticipated would have come from the projects category. But when this new funding became available to us, we sat down with the commissioner and department senior leadership and looked at, well, what do we do now that we're given money? We're getting kind of made whole, if you will. So we felt it would be good to go back and restore our maintenance. Certainly, if you defer maintenance activities, it will cost you in the long run. So with the new dollars available to us, we wanted to go ahead and restore our routine maintenance funding. For the Improve Act transit grants, we didn't eliminate that entire program. There were some dollars left in it. We worked with the transit providers that had provided information to us, and we believe by partially reinstating some of those funds. As we noted in the previous slide, the legislation requires $22 million of the $209 million that came to Tennessee to go to the 4 largest metropolitan planning organizations. We have about 8 small metropolitan planning organizations, and we felt that it was the intent of these federal dollars that it was appropriate to put at the same relative ratio to provide the small MPOs with about $4 million. And then the bulk of the money would go toward large highway projects. The stuff that y'all would expect to see in the Improve Act. Those projects are in the Improve Act. And then from a pavement standpoint, we have some concrete pavements. About 2% of our network is concrete pavements. And you can't do just a resurfacing project on those. You got to do big work on those. So we identified about $40 million to address some of those concrete rehab projects. And then about $20 million to do safety type projects. Across the state, we do get special safety funds from the federal level, but the criteria to do good, solid safety projects that might not have the crash history that allows us to use some of those federal dollars. Going on to the next slide. Whoops. Well, quick about our calendar year lettings. Last year, we just a little over $1 billion in contracts. So when we passed the Improve Act, our letting totals started to increase from about $900 million to somewhere around $1.1 billion was the trajectory that we were headed to. With the coronavirus, how people interact with each other, one of the areas that was heaviest impacted was our right-of-way acquisition. If you can imagine, when you buy somebody's property, you go meet with them and talk with them, and you have to go record stuff at the courthouse, and people weren't too keen on us coming in the front door. Some of the courthouses were shut down for a little bit back last summer, so it put some delays in our program. So our letting totals were just over $1 billion last year. Our projection is to be up to about $1.15 billion And that's where we're going to probably plateau out with Improve Act funding. So we'll do a little bit catch up this year. We've got processes in place now that allows us to do more of that right of way work more remotely. But so we're catching back up in that area. Talking about the Improve Act, 962 projects were identified in the legislation, plus the legislation spoke to state of good repair and maintaining our existing assets. Some of those projects, for instance, like there's 2 and 3 pieces. So the 962 projects in our system have show up as 1,021 projects. And of those 1,021 projects, 502 are in some phase of development, either underway in some phase or complete. And 39% of them we have yet to start yet. If you'll recall, when we passed the Improve Act, we were anticipating maybe a 15 to 20 year delivery time. We were seeing inflation at about 5% a year. The program is not indexed to inflation, so we're having to do a little bit of Ouija board projections, if you will, on what, exactly when it's going to be finished, because inflation does have a pretty significant impact on it. Next bill, y'all just talking, I'll brag on Chairman Marsh for carrying our legislation. Y'all just heard some discussion on it, and so I won't belabor that. And I'll ask if Jay Norris will next talk a little bit about some work zone safety information.
Chairman, thank you. Can you hear me okay now? Great. It's good to be with you all. I'm Jay Norris. I'm the Director of Occupational Health and Safety at TDOT. I'm going to give you guys a work zone safety update. And so I've got a slide up here that has 4 pictures on it, and we'll be moving top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. Just want to make 4 points for you all. And when the pandemic started, we saw the way motoring public was using our transportation system drop off quite a bit. And after 6 or 8 weeks, people began to enjoy those open roads and began speeding. As a result, fatalities increased. We saw that people weren't wearing seat belts, so we had some unrestrained things going on out there. And so my first point is that bad behaviors began to be identified on our transportation system. And so I also want to take a second here and caveat that TDOT is in a new reality when it comes to how we're operating on our system. So we have 1,975 new employees we've hired in the last 3 years. 60% of our maintenance technicians have been with the department less than 5 years. If you look at the age of our interstate system, it's over 60 years old now. So we're doing a lot of maintenance out there. And distracted driving continues to be a challenge. So if you take those behaviors and look at how the department's operating, that can be a real challenge for us. So point 2, if you look at the top right, you can see a work zone there. And my point is that drivers are taking their bad behaviors through these work zones. And work zones are interesting places. You have your width of your lanes are reduced. Sometimes you don't have shoulders. You can take a look at that picture and see the 2 tractor trailers there are almost kissing going through a work zone. And this can be a real challenge for us. So these things not only affect the driver at this point, but we have the road building industry working in these areas. TDOT workers are working in those areas. We have 95 counties, and we have lane closures going on in those in every county every day. So there's a lot of these out there. So point 3 is in the bottom left. You see a physics equation up there, and that's actually the formula for kinetic energy. I'm very familiar with this personally because when I was 16, I got my first speeding ticket. My father, as punishment, made me calculate how much kinetic energy I generate. He was an engineer at TDOT, so I might have been grounded, might have been better. And so in this formula, 1/2 mv squared, the m is the mass or the weight, v is the velocity or speed of your vehicle. So your energy increases 225% when you go from 50 miles an hour to 75 miles an hour. And that's how hard you're hitting something. So this is a big deal. And my third point is that we are all in the energy business here. TDOT's role is to design good traffic control plans, use attenuators, make sure that our maintenance workers, our work zones internally are perfect. We want to make sure that we have good standards for our contractors who use our road building industry. Their role is to take our plans and set up and maintain good traffic control. Our law enforcement is to keep those speeds low, keep that energy low. And finally, the motoring public's responsibility is to reduce their energy as they pass through these systems and watch out for their behaviors. So my last point is this: in the bottom right, you can see a picture of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and that document is a strategy on how we're to attack reducing the number of fatalities in our system. We want to take that same approach with our work zones. And so with the help of the Department of Safety, THP, Tennessee Highway Safety Office, Tennessee Road Builders Association, we've formed a working group to attack some of these strategies. So we've got three things that we're trying to do in our charter. And the first is we want to maximize safety of all of our work zones. The second one is we want to minimize delay and other negative operational aspects. So think about innovative technology, the way we can leverage things to make things better. And the final is we want to be best. We want to be best in the nation at the 3 E's. And so that's engineering, enforcement, and education. So TDOT owns the engineering E. We want great standards, specifications, technology, equipment. We want to make sure our staff is trained and equipped to do what they do perfectly when they're out there. Enforcement, we want to make sure they have the absolute best resources and training available. We want a best in nation here when it comes to that. And the final E is education, is we want to make sure that drivers understand their behaviors and they help control those. So finally, I'd like to, I really want to give praise to the Tennessee Highway Patrol and the Tennessee Road Builders Association being part of this partnership, and can't say enough good things about them. They're incredible partners. Love working with them. And now I'd like to turn over to Michelle Frazier, Director of Aeronautics. Thank you.
Michelle.
On now? All right. Okay. Thanks, members, for having us today. My name is Michelle Frazier, and I'm the Director of Aeronautics at TDOT. I wanted to start off with just a brief overview of Tennessee's aviation system. We have across the network 78 airports. That includes 6 commercial service airports and 72 general aviation airports. You may all be familiar with those 6 commercial service, but it's important to note that all the airports, all 78, contribute to the transportation system in Tennessee. So if you are a farmer in in rural West Tennessee, you're thankful for the airport at Union City where you receive crop dusting services. If you're a citizen in rural East Tennessee, you're thankful for the airports in Jacksboro and Rockwood and Morristown where UT Lifestar is located, providing medical evacuation services for the citizens in those areas. Our office is responsible for giving grant funding to these locally owned airports. And in recent years, our funding has decreased, as you're going to see in this presentation. So we don't have enough money to go around, as most people you talk to. I'm sure that's the case. So we really have to prioritize our projects. So next slide. So in August of 2019, our division entered into a contract with Kimley Horn to provide an aviation system are designed to help us make yearly. And it's with great pride that I'm able to say that the aviation system in Tennessee contributed $40 billion in economic activity for the state in 2019. And that's a pre-COVID number. That supports $8.6 billion in visitor spending and supports over 221,000 jobs in the state of Tennessee.
Michelle, let me just tell the committee real quick, there's apparently a problem with the presentation not showing up on the screen. I don't know if the copies y'all have, but we'll ensure we get a good copy to you.
Sorry about that. All right, next slide. We'll see if it shows up here. All right, just continue. Okay, well, I apologize that you guys don't get to see that. One subcomponent of our study was to look at tax impacts, both state and local. So tax impacts for aviation contributed $1.1 billion. On the state side, we received $739 million in state tax revenue. On the slides, we had highlighted a figure for aviation fuel sales, which was 27 million. And that 27 million funds the Transportation Equity Fund for aviation, which funds our office and also capital improvement projects that we use, that we have at these local airports.
Just let me comment real quick. That information that's not showing up on the slide is on dashboard. Members, if you have your iPad, it's on the dashboard here. Thank you.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulty. Okay. So we had a graph that was a really good depiction of the TEF for aviation over the last 10 years. If you're able to see that, you would notice that there's a pretty big decrease in funding for aviation in the year 2015. Part of that was due to prices of fuel in 2015 that decreased, but additionally, we were impacted by 2015 legislation, which capped the collection of fuel tax on any single user across the state. I also want to note that our collections that I mentioned for last fiscal year, 27 million, we expect due to COVID that's going to decrease to around 13 to 15 this year. So we'll have about a 50% hit due to COVID. One more. I think I'm ready. Okay, you can hit the next slide, Commissioner. So the TEF for aviation is used to maintain the assets that you see listed on this slide. This includes our biggest investment, which is, of course, pavement. The average area weighted age of our pavement in the aviation system is 21 years. And we've recently completed a study that indicates that we have a backlog of needed maintenance on the pavement of over $462 million. And that's just on our general aviation airports. Next slide. Our budget for 2021 is $34 million. This includes 29.4 in state and federal funding for those 72 general aviation airports and $5 million for our air carrier airports. Only general aviation funding comes through our office. So the commercial service numbers, that 74 million you see there is listed separately. They receive that money directly from the FAA. And as you can understand by the number I gave you that we have a backlog of over $468 million in pavement, our $34 million budget falls a little short for us. So I just want to end by saying, you know, aviation is an important part of transportation. In Tennessee, it's a big driver of the economy as shown by that $40 billion number. And I want to thank you all for your support and the additional funds that have been put in the budget this year. So thank you for supporting aviation in Tennessee.
Thank you.
And I will turn it over to Preston Elliott, who is TDOT's Deputy Commissioner of Environment and Planning.
You're recognized, Ms. Shelley.
How about now? Is it better? Okay, awesome. Preston Elliott, Chief of Environment and Planning. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I think we're giving you the full modes today, so I'm going to follow up here on the short line rail program. And we got the slide up. And Tennessee, the DOT has been involved in rail transportation services since, actively involved since 1970s. And in the markets in some of their lower volume routes. And so in 1987, the legislature, you all approved the Transportation Equity Program and also started to actively fund investments in Tennessee's short line rail program. Across the state, there are 21 short line rail operators and 16 authorities, and that represents about 817 miles of short line rail serving 33 counties across the state, 9 of which are either distressed or at risk. And it's important to note that of these 817 miles in the 33 counties, there are also 16 interchanges in which these lines interconnect with our Class 1 railroads. So it's a very expansive system. So it's not really just 33 counties that are benefiting and utilizing these short lines. We felt it was important to give you all an update because of the $85 million that's in the budget for the short line program. And we have recently completed, just this last year, a short line needs assessment. And prior to this last year, the last time a needs assessment was done on our short line program was in 2005. I'm going to hit three areas, and it's primarily the graphics to the bottom right, excuse me, bottom left. Looking at the rail program and the rail system, we looked at the short line, the track itself, and the opportunities for them to move freight. And so the speed of which we move freight is an element of it. Also, an element of it is the amount of weight that our lines can handle. So focusing first on speed, we have about 54% of the rail system that is tapped at about 10 miles per hour. So really, only about 46% is able to go up to 25 miles per hour. So that's one aspect of the needs assessment, is the ability to reinvest in our rail systems to get them up to higher speeds. The second aspect is the weight component, and that's the 286, it's the tonnage. And about 41% of the system does not meet that weight carry load. So the ability to get our lines up to a standard that allows for movement of freight. And then the last aspect of the needs assessment is on structures. And about 61% of those structures, there's about 518 structures on our short line program or system. About 61% are either poor or fair. So when you take these aspects of the asset itself, we find that about $3.2 million of need if we were to bring them up to a certain level of 10 miles per hour. If we were to bring all of the 54% that doesn't meet the 25 miles per hour, that's another 10.2 or 10.2 million. And then the loadage component, that's the 286. That's 213.9 million of need. And then on the bridges, we're looking at about $70 million. Now, it's important that this is maintenance aspects. I try to think about it as we look at our roads. You know, we have crews out there that are day in and day out, but then we also have projects that we contract with to add value to our system. So these aspects of needs are these deferred maintenance. So they're the bigger, longer term aspects of things. So that's a quick overview of the short line program.
Thank you.
Chairman Howell, that concludes our presentation, so
Okay.
we'll open up for questions.
If you have a little time, we'll see if the members
sir.
have some questions for you. Members, you have questions? Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it. Back to you, Mr. Elliott. Can you, and you know that may have blew across, but in your presentation, what is the new construction when it comes to short line rail, to a track? Per mile? What is that?
I'm sorry, you're saying in terms of adding, or
New construction.
New construction. So a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, we had the competitive connectivity grant program that was part of the short line. And that is the only program we have for adding new. The vast majority of these needs are maintaining the existing system. So I think it was a $10.3 million that we had as part of the connectivity grant program.
So that's part of the connectivity program, but again, you can't produce for me a number per mile, cost per mile.
Oh, cost.
That was my
I'm
question, and my apology, maybe I didn't make myself clear.
I don't have that information.
You do not have that information.
Not in front of me at this time, but it is the calculation on the needs.
Is that something you could provide to the chairman? at a later-
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
Next on the list is Representative Grills. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, TDOT, for all you've done the past couple of weeks. I represent District 47 over in Region 4. I went by there a couple of nights to see those guys, and they were walking zombies, yet they still stuck with it, and I appreciate the dedication they had. And I don't live far from the maintenance shop there in New Bern, and my road got cleaned off very quick. I appreciate the efforts they put forth. But with that, we were talking about the federal money. The the feds are always talking about clean energy and, battery powered vehicles. What's going to happen to our transportation fund when everybody's driving a battery operated car or electric car as far as our road maintenance? What's the expectation? What's the trends? What do y'all see as far as what's the forecast over the next 4 to 5 years? Because obviously the new administration, we're fixing to see lots of efforts put in that direction.
So I'll
That's a
answer part
concern
of,
for me because I have I-69 in my district, which is a huge,
Right.
huge asset to my part of the world. So I want to make sure the money's there to finish it.
well, you bring up a good point, and we're asked that question a lot. And I'll let Joe weigh in a little bit, but prior to that is, so right now, we've got about 6,500 electric vehicles on the road. We charge them $100 a year as far as that's their usage fee. And there's 6.5 million cars out there. And Joe can tell you how fast those electric cars are going to come online. Sometimes I think it may be sooner rather than later, since we've got 3 major auto manufacturers in the state of Tennessee. So at some point, we are going to be the lead in the country as the center of building those electric vehicles. And we got the battery plants here also. So we better be ready for what's coming down the road. So a lot of that is being handled there's a lot of discussions at the federal level with US DOT and with the new administration coming in, the new Secretary of Transportation, asking that question, what are we going to do as a nation to go from usage fees based on diesel fuel and gas to a full vehicle miles traveled and and the trucking industry already does that. So how are we going to do that going forward? There's a lot of pushback across the country, and all the constituents you answer to, there's going to be a lot of pushback there because nobody wants Big Brother checking on them on how many miles they travel within the state, knowing that somebody's maybe tracking them. So we're going to be coming back to you in the future to help us with that problem. But we're having those conversations. We need leadership at the federal level. And we've got several other states across the country. Oregon and Utah are going through pilot programs to see how a VMT program would work as far as keeping up with that, and how would that supply the revenue they need to keep on track. Joe, you want to add?
Sure. Joe Galbato, Chief Financial Officer. So, as Commissioner mentioned, so the fee that we charge in Tennessee for an electric vehicle is $100. And so if you looked at the normal gas-powered vehicle, and again, the assumption would be 13,500 miles per year, which is a pretty good average, 21 miles per gallon, which is a pretty good average. Then you add on the federal tax, the state tax, that gas-powered car would pay somewhere around $300. $297 is what it calculates out to. So today, we're not, the electric vehicle does not pay anywhere near what that person does. As Commissioner mentioned, we only have 0.1% penetration today, 6,500 cars versus a 6 million capacity. So what I wanted to point out is that we're working with the University of Tennessee and to try to look at what they think the penetration would be. What we're seeing right now, at least the latest projections they had, somewhere around 2025, 2026 is when we'll start to see any major, any decrease to our program, which would be somewhere in the $30 million range, and then obviously expand after that. So that's really as far out as we can look and anticipate at this point. But as Commissioner mentioned, without changes to how we collect those fees, we will be just monitoring and adjust our budget accordingly.
Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Chairman. This question, and thanks, TDOT. I appreciate all that you do, keeping us number one. And thanks for fixing the potholes.
We've got a lot left to do.
There's a lot to go, thanks to this wonderful weather we've had. But I appreciate what you do, and sincerely. This question is for Mr. Elliott. So since the last assessment of our short rails was made, you said in 2005?
Correct.
I guess my question is, I'm sure you're thinking going forward, there are so many, and my good friend down the road here, he'd probably go, what are you talking about, TL? And that is, there are so many trucks on the road. I've always believed that rail was a way to eliminate some of that traffic on our highways, but also to eliminate what semis do to our highways. And I know they pay a lot and they contribute a lot. I guess what I'm trying to find out is, do you have any kind of numbers that prove, your data would prove that rail, we need to consider doing more of that for distributing goods and things that we need, especially out in our rural areas?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I actually was pulling off a statistic a little earlier today, and 1 gallon of diesel can move 1 ton of freight 500 miles. So if you think
Okay,
of
say that again.
1 gallon of diesel can move 1 ton of freight 500 miles. So, and so it's actually 492, I think, is what the math works out to be. But when you think about the impact that has on alleviating, especially heavy freight from our roadways, there's absolutely a benefit as it looks at our pavement and our other assets such as bridges. So to any diversion or any opportunity to increase the amount of commodities that are moved on rail is an absolute benefit.
You recognize.
And so, Mr. Elliott, is there, with the monies and the numbers that you gave here on speed, weight, structure, is there a plan going forward to improve, and how much, what is the amount of money you are looking at to invest in our rails to get them ready to do? Because I know we have a short rail that goes pretty near to my home, and I don't even think they go 10 miles an hour. I think that's speeding, actually. But, and they move coal out from that, come through that area. So is there any plan, and how much money are you looking at to fix these so you can move more product on our rails?
Yeah, thank you. Another great question. So that is part of the reason for the actual budget line item for the 85 million is for about 7 years, I believe. The Transportation Equity Fund has been through litigation, and it's hampered our ability to actually make investments in our rail system. So we are utilizing the needs assessment as well as looking at these dollars, how we can maximize and leverage even additional federal dollars because there's opportunities on the rail side to do that. So we are looking at a variety of options and ways that we might even look at some sort of contracting mechanisms that could create some innovation for cost efficiencies.
So to better
thank
answer
you.
that question, Representative Weaver, if you look at this, we're trying to get the rails up to 25 miles an hour, the benchmark we were looking for, and we're trying to take care of our bridge structures. If we do that, that's right at 85 million. So that's where that dollar amount came from. Yes, ma'am.
Representative Grills, I didn't realize you had a follow-up, so I'm going to come back to you. You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No problem whatsoever. That's okay, Mr. Chairman. We love you. Back on the $300 for the combustible type vehicle versus the electric vehicle. So they're paying 100, we're paying 300, for hypothetical state. And then they're going to be subsidized at the federal level, most likely, because this is a huge initiative from current administration. So we're going to pay them to build a vehicle. It's going to drive on our roads that the combustible drivers are going to have to, bear the burden on. And that's a problem for me, just from where I'm sitting. Thank God for those men and women who are driving a car out there that pays for the roads that we're driving, so these other folks can ride on them for nothing, essentially. That's a little bit of a problem from where I'm coming from. And if anybody wants to say anything to that, that's fine, but I want to go in another direction.
Okay.
The fuel that's capped with the airports, it's capped for certain folks. And when it's capped, can they buy all of their fuel for that company through Tennessee and distribute it across the country? Or does it have to be delivered here in Tennessee? Can it be billed in Tennessee and then distributed throughout the country? Or does it have to be delivered here in Tennessee in order for it to be exempt from once they meet the cap?
I believe it's point of location.
Yeah, so that question is probably best asked of Department of Revenue, but I believe it's captured as when it's distributed out of Tennessee. So they're filling up their airplanes as they leave here.
Okay, so if I were the company, I've maxed out my tax, and then I have other places throughout the country. I can't distribute it from Tennessee over to there without paying.
I'm not sure what the cost of moving that kind
Yeah.
of fuel that long, that would offset that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would love to get a good conversation in the office one day with a short line railroad. But got too many questions about that here. So thank y'all so much for all you do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just a quick note, I was reminded, I believe, when the Improve Act was voted on into law, I think there were 1,500 electric vehicles, maybe at that time, and now it's 6,500, so it's quadrupled. So I agree with you, Commissioner. I believe it's going to be here quicker than we realize. Did you have a comment, Joe? Did you want to?
No,
Okay.
I was agreeing, Chair.
Representative Towns, you're next. You're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As always, Commissioners, TDOT business is very, very interesting, very enlightening. We learn a lot. It's like going to class. We ought to be able to get, Mr. Chairman, we ought to be able to get some CEU credits for this stuff, you know? You need to work on that, Mr. Chairman, so we get us some credits, you know? But the deal of it is, a lot of interesting stuff, as I said. The Improve Act, and this, you should give me a figure on this. I got a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, about 2 or 3. How much have we generated on the Improve Act totally?
From a dollar point of view?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so the first year, the Improve Act gave us 100, well, the budget was that it was going to deliver 151 million. We actually received 154, so 3 million more. The second year, we were supposed to receive 197. We actually received 199 million, 2 million more. And then last year, we were supposed to receive 244, but because of COVID, it was down by 7. So net over that time, if I can work my 151 plus 197 plus 244, we were supposed to get 592 and we got 590 million. So that's cumulatively for 3 years. And then going forward, it should be 244 to 250 million going forward in a non-COVID world.
Thank you for that. Commissioner, obviously, safety is very important to all of us, okay? Anybody's driving, safety. And unfortunately, around the country and sometimes around the world, we've seen bridges actually collapse, okay? Talking about an infrastructure about 60 years old, right? Now, for the last 3 or 4 or 5 administrations and at the federal level, they've not done anything at all, okay? And to me, that's unacceptable, okay? Now, what I'm thinking is this, is that commissioners around the country, all 50 states, bipartisan, need to get together and go there and tell these knuckleheads what we need done, okay? And we need to, yes, I did, okay? And what we need to do, because eventually something's gonna happen, okay? Every time I come from Memphis to here, I cross a number of bridges. And when it's bad, that thought goes through my mind, okay? Even though I know our guys do a tremendous job, but the same token is just, I'm human. And I know the time, and everything has a time period on it. Everything expires at some point in time. So my question to you is, can we, initiate an initiative like that and get these commissioners or these governors to go up there and talk to these jokers and see if we can get this money to do our infrastructure, okay?
Okay. So I'll have you a short answer, but I want Paul to weigh in kind of
Okay.
on our bridge program so he can give you, hopefully, some level of comfort of what we're doing in the state. So we're part of a group. Everybody that's spoken today is part of a group called ASHTO, and that's all 50 DOTs coming together, working on these kind of strategies. Last week was supposedly our week in Washington. So we have conference calls with all our congressmen and senators, and we're pushing them and helping educate them like we have done with you today, educating them on what our needs are and pushing our agenda with them so they can hopefully help us help you. So that's one thing that's being handled there. I want Paul to talk a little bit about the state level on the bridge program.
Sure. So if you listen to the national news, you hear stories about how our nation's infrastructure is crumbling. I'll submit to you that Tennessee is in a very good position. Through initiatives like the Improve Act, or the General Assembly actually acted on a Better Bridges program several years ago. So we actually have among the best bridges. There's only 8 states in the U.S. that have more bridges than Tennessee has. Okay. Yet we rank about 8th in the country in the quality of our bridges, and we're a very wet state. If you live out in the desert somewhere, bridges just don't rock like they do in the wet areas. So our bridges are in strong shape on the state highway network. And if you go down a level to city and county networks out there, You know, the Improve Act, for instance, had 525 bridges on local roads. We already had a very healthy bridge program. TDOT, over the last 30 years, TDOT has funded 2/3 of all bridge replacements on local roads. So through our state aid program and through a special federal set aside, TDOT has been very active in working with local government, getting bridges replaced as well. Now, that being said, about 6 or 7% of bridges on local roads are in not great shape. On the state highway system, probably around 3%. But I will tell you that every single bridge that is open to traffic is safe for the posted loads. I know Chair Lady Weaver and I first met at a meeting about a bridge in her district that we had to close because it was not safe for traffic on it. We ultimately were able to do a repair project on it. She celebrated the opening of the bridge with us, and many of you have had bridges in your district that have probably had to be closed for one reason or another. But again, our inspection program, TDOT does the inspection on all publicly owned, except for federal reservations. But for all state, city, and county routes, TDOT does the inspection every 2 years to ensure that we have safe bridges for people to drive on.
You recognize, Representative?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and that's very comforting. And I hope we maintain that, but still, that money, we need that money in Tennessee to do that
For
other
sure.
6%, 3%. And I think that a collaborative effort, bipartisan, will get them to move, okay? As it relates to safety, again, Mr. Commissioner, those areas that are being worked on, and we all have to pass through those areas where people are working. And we should slow down and pay attention, and we don't sometimes. And when it's bad, it's really bad. So I didn't hear from you all, and you may have not thought this far. What is it that you think we can do to ensure that we have better safety in those areas? And also, you know, a lot of young people and a lot of older in between may not know the rules when it comes to slowing down in these areas. You should do it as common sense because you can't hardly navigate. And are we taking advantage of, you know, the PSAs to kind of let people know this is what you need to do when you come upon a construction area, okay? And so I want to know, you know, are you using that, and what else are you think we need to do to help you all with that?
So I will tell you this, and I did mention this before, Jay Norris, who spoke earlier, Department of Safety, he is lead, and I mentioned that ASHTO, where all the state DOTs are part of that. He is heading up a task force across the country with all the 50 DOTs about how we can improve work zone safety. So I say we do have an expert in the state of Tennessee that's helping us with what we're trying to do. He talks about the 3 E's. He talks about engineering, and that's what we can do to design those work zones as safe as we can to protect our public and to protect our workers.
Absolutely.
We talk about enforcement. What we maybe didn't really accentuate is we started this work zone group that started this summer, which includes the Tennessee Road Builders, the Department of Safety, and also ourselves on the engineering side. So we're working through how we can really work best together. We have programs like Work With Us that started, I think, in 2016, 2017, as far as educating the public about please work with us, slow down, move over. So that's the mantra. You look at our digital display boards that we have across the state, we're trying to educate the public there. So we're trying to take care of the education part, the engineering part, and we're having conversations with enforcement. How can we better enforce in those work zones? Is it requiring a blue light all the time, or are there other things that we can do to mitigate that risk? So that's some of what's going on out there to work on that problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And Commissioner.
Thank you. Representative McKenzie, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I didn't have a question, but more of a comment on the presentation download that you all gave us on the aviation portion. The graphics did not, that the one you just passed up, the graphics and some of the labels did not show up on that. So y'all may want to re-save that and send it back out to us.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. Speaker Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too appreciate you all coming, and I appreciate the hard work that happened during the ice and snow. And you don't know how much that meant to all of the rural counties too. We were in a bad shape. And I want to say to one of our members that trucks still mostly have to handle traffic that goes on the rail. And I think in the trucking industry, we would be happy with more rail because we're having a tremendously hard time finding enough drivers. And I think the more rail that happens will be good for the trucking industry. Well, I'd like to ask Mr. Elliott, several years ago, I dealt with the small rail folks on the Transportation Equity Fund. And I knew it was in a lawsuit.
Mhm.
And at one time, I understand there were like $40 million held in with you all in a fund over there. And I guess that what I want to ask is that 40 million already gone out, and the 85 million just coming out of the general fund into the small railroad lines, I guess, in it repair. What happened to the 40 million that was there that was on hold?
Okay. Okay. So Chairman, here's what happened. So there was about 42.7 million. 12 million was given out because it was allocated before. 10 million came out actually from the legislature telling us to get rid of 10. And then there was 20.6 million left. 10.3 went via formula like the other, and then 10.3 came via competitive grants. So today, all of that 42.7 that we've received in the past is out there. All but 5 million is on a contract right now. So everything is out, pretty much out there on a contract. We have nothing else in reserve other than the 41 million we talked about that came this year, the 39 back payment plus the 2 million normal that was actually abnormal. There is on the new excise tax, the 17 cents on the dyed diesel, there is about 30 million in escrow that we're not able to touch at this point. So the money we were given before, the 42.7, we've received, it's out there. Most of it is on a contract. The rest of it is in escrow right now. We can't touch it at this point.
You recognize?
What I think most people need to understand in here is that when this small short line was formed, the large Class A railroads didn't want to go in these small areas anymore. So they basically gave them away. And in the deal that they gave them away, they were going to pay 17 cents on a gallon, I guess it was. Every gallon of diesel that they bought was going to go into a fund to help these short line folks build their bridges and keep up the tracks. And now how much money a year is coming in from that tax? Is that still on hold?
Well, Chairman, so I don't know how much on a yearly basis. I know that right now, as of I think it was of December, there was about 30 million in that escrow account. As far as what's coming to us today, I mean, it's next to nothing, other than, like I said, these back payments that we got this year.
So where's that money going?
Well, it goes into escrow in either F&A or Department of Revenue. It's being held. And remember, we have two lawsuits. Lawsuits on we have lawsuits on the old tax, the sales tax, and on the new tax. And so we're not allowed to touch it. So it just goes into an escrow account to be used at such a point that we get a favorable ruling.
But if we didn't have the injunction, is it 5 to 7 million a year?
If we didn't, it would, in the past, it was somewhere, a little less than 5. So you can plan on 3 to 5 a year.
Not much then.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money.
Thank you.
Last on the list is Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. Your presentations are always on point every year, and I look forward to hearing them. I had a question about the electric cars. How do y'all go about collecting that tax?
Joseph?
So the Department of Revenue does that. So electric vehicles, they have to register as an again, it's a totally electric vehicle, and they pay that $100 at vehicle registration time.
You recognize?
So it's safe to say people paying the tax on electric cars are only Tennessee residents, and we share the tax on the gas with people traveling through and Tennessee residents.
That is correct.
You recognize?
And one question about the airports. How many airports in the state of Tennessee doesn't have a instrument landing system? And are there any kind of grants where they can get an instrument landing system?
I don't know if Michelle would want.
I apologize. I don't know that I know that number off the top of my head, but it's certainly something we can get. But instrument approaches are a goal for certain level of airports. Of course, at some airports, it's not something that we would look at funding through a grant program, but it is something that airports can put on their capital improvement projects for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Members, we have about 9 minutes until we have to give up this room. Any other questions from the membership? Representative Towns.
Chairman, if we want to keep the room, I think we can take them, okay? We can take it.
We'll put you on the front line.
No problem. Bring it.
I so appreciate TDOT for coming today, and I really enjoyed this, Commissioner. Thank you so much, and to your team. And obviously, this is something that the membership is very interested in because you got a lot of questions. I found the presentation to be very comprehensive and very informative. And I've found that if you have any questions about anything in your district regarding funding or bridges or roads that involves your district, TDOT is always available to answer those questions. I've called them several times. Probably Paul gets tired of seeing my phone pop up.
Call me anytime.
But I really do appreciate you being here, and I know the members do as well. Any further comments, Commissioner?
Thank y'all very much.
Members,
Appreciate it.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So move. We are adjourned.